polarities are a way to really help with complexity. And so, first of all, I think, Betsy, you and I had a conversation around, I think complexity, I'm not minimizing it, but one of my things about complexity is when working with leaders is to remind them that, like, we're human beings, we do complexity. Like that's what we do. Like, and so when people, I think that there can be almost a paralyzing conversation that can happen inside of organizations right now. It's like, the world's so complex. What do we do? And it's like, that's what humans do. I mean, have you ever tried to grow your own food, right? Or to survive, throughout history, like we have navigated complexity. And so, just when you say that's one of the things for me is always around, like, let's not paralyze ourselves with that. And it is important because the world is uber complex. So both of those things are true. And polarities can help with that, because when I think about complexity and dealing with complexity, in a complex situation, all you can do is create the conditions for the system to thrive and to be able to thrive in complexity. And I think that one of the ways to do that is by navigating some of the key polarities that are really important for that to happen. So, for example, no matter what you call it, whether it's direct and empower, or participative decisions and directive decisions, but inside of a complex system, we can't lean into direction and control and top down, right? We need the system, right, to be out doing what it needs to do, which involves a lot more of the empowerment and the participative. And but what happens is during complexity is when people get tense, they want to pull that control back, and they forget to navigate that polarity. And so I think polarities can help us, create the conditions, and there are other ones, obviously. And then also, I think people oftentimes think that situations are complex because of the fact that two things do have to exist. How do we focus on our local needs and our global needs at the same time? And that seems complex, and that seems, and so I think that polarities also helps in that realm as well. So
For sure. I was working with a leader yesterday, actually, and the frame I'm holding with him right now is, he's a CEO, how does he move from hero to host? Like, from the guy that knows everything about this company that he built from just
Yep.
nothing to about $8 billion right now. How do you move from hero to host? And then, as a host, what is the way in which you hold that? And he got into, and he is a really fun guy to coach. We get a lot of kind of quick back and forths, but he got into the significant complexity that they're operating in. And I used your notion about growing your food, and I was like, it's what you are in is super complex. And we as humans are built for complexity. I just want to, like, if I told you that starting today you had to grow your own food, like no more grocery store, no more ordering, no more DoorDash. Do you know that, like, many, many, many humans over time have done this, and you'd figure it out too. But can you imagine the complexity of trying to figure that out? And he started laughing, and I loved it because it kind of broke this paralyzing frame he was in the moment, which is, I've moved to this servant to the system. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. This is so big. It's so complex. I can't move. And then just that reminder of, like, well, if you had to grow your own food tomorrow, it would be very complex and you could figure it out, made him laugh and take a different frame and perspective on it. And so I was very appreciative to you for that learning with him, because he got it. And then we moved to the place of, what are the conditions I need to create to allow this to happen? So I feel like there's a couple of really useful kind of practitioner tools in just the setup of going to the place of, what polarity might you be managing inside of that.
One that we've talked about, Brian, before, and we even did like a short session for a client around it, is this polarity between challenge and support. And I find, particularly in this moment where there is a lot of ambiguity, there is a lot of complexity, but I think also organizations are sort of trying to find this this sweet spot between high performance and high well-being, right? Like, so how do we sort of go for it without burning ourselves out? And this challenge support, and I'll often talk to leaders about it. I think it really applies in our space as well as coaches, right? And I think as coaches, we're sort of trained in this kind of provoking transformation and at the same time holding the container where it can happen. And so there's lots of ways that we approach that, but I think great coaches, we sort of find a way to marry the two. The thing that was an unlock for me in our conversation was that support wasn't about making it safe to fail. It was about confidence. And it was about sort of breathing confidence into the system and making it safe to ask for help. And I thought that was a really interesting counterpart to, because I think there's a lot of challenge right now, and there's a lot of going for it and pushing harder. I think that sort of the world around us kind of necessitates a lot of it. What I don't see is leaders thinking about, how do I build an environment where it's safe to learn, it's safe to ask for help, and you can be vulnerable enough to say that you don't know. Because in a sense, if you're going to challenge, you're by definition asking people to do things they haven't yet done. And as soon as that appetite for learning or growth or that sort of permission to ask for help starts to fade, I think that's when systems start to collapse on themselves. And I'm wondering if you can just say a little bit about that challenge support, because I cannot tell you how many, I mean, it's sort of one of those, once you discover this beautiful hammer, you just start seeing nails everywhere. So there's maybe a little bit of that, but I swear in half the conversations I have, I'm like, I've got something to teach you. A very smart guy named Brian taught me about challenge and support. So I'd love to hear you say a little bit about that. Yeah.
Yeah, challenge and support. It's such an important one, and I love the way that you, Paul, when you start to talk about what do we mean by support, right? And what does support really mean? What does support look like? I think one of the this is a little bit of a tangent, but when we work with leaders, we so often in so many cultures we're taught to live by the golden rule, right? Which is do unto others as they have them do unto you. So we support people the way we think support looks for us, and that's just not the case, right? It's more about, people talk about the platinum rule, which is do unto others as they would have you do unto them, right? And so, what does support look like to them? Because there are some people, on my team, support looks like, sitting down and asking them questions and making sure that they understand the steps. Other people, it's just more of a jump in and pat them on the back, right? And so it's, or it's about removing roadblocks. And so I think when we talk challenge and support, and that's what's important, tying it back to polarities, is how do we define the poles is really important, right? Because language is so limiting, right? And so but the challenge support one is one that I think there are a couple of different ways that individuals, systems, teams deal with polarities, and one is they do a little bit of one, then they do a little bit of the other, and then they do a little bit of one and a little bit of the other. And in the challenge support realm, that can be a little dangerous, because as an employee, I don't know what I'm going to get when, right? Like which leader's showing up today, the bad witch or the good witch, like and so and which is why we focus so much on what Wendy Smith and Marianne Lewis would call the dynamic equilibrium, but we call it the third way, which is how do you really blend and get the best of both. And I think that's what's important for challenges support, is because then people can trust it and jump into it a little bit more.